Welcome back, everybody, to a Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would like to introduce Kara Goodwin. She's a meditation and spiritual transformation coach, host of the Meditation Conversation podcast, energy healer, and bookkeeper. She was drawn to meditation after a tragic year, which brought many losses in quick succession: the death of her sister-in-law, a tragic accident for her mother-in-law, ICU, and a heart transplant for her stepmother, all while she was living out of the country. Whoa. It felt as though her whole reality shifted, and she dedicated herself to learning the art of meditation. Through her deepening practice of meditation, she has opened herself up to a strong connection with Source. In the years since she has been meditating and guiding others on journeys, she has uncovered latent energy, healing capabilities, and experiences frequent unexplainable phenomena such as visions, journeys into multidimensional realms, inner knowings verified in the external environment insights. She has had several powerful transcendental experiences where she has experienced her consciousness outside of her body as something much bigger than her little self, and also had transcendental experiences where she has viscerally experienced her body as a cosmic entity, feeling, seeing her chakras and their corresponding elemental connections, feeling the different parts of her brain and how each part relates to frequency, how consciousness is a non-local and memories experiences are stored in the body. That's for sure. These have been spellbinding revelations to experience, which have completely shifted how she sees the life experience and the power and potential of each life here. Most importantly, although these experiences are unique in their own way, they are also universal in that they have shown the framework that we are all living in our human experiences. Welcome to a Little Less Fear podcast, Kara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, finally we are connected, and I love your background.
Oh, thank you.
The
My little
mandala.
Taurus back here.
Yeah, oh, that's incredible. Hey, Kara, this is an incredible loaded biography of yours, and I'd like to know what brought you to this incredible journey. Like, how did you spiritually become aligned in this incredible journey that you're on today?
Yeah. So, when I started seeking out meditation, it really was more of a coping mechanism because it was in the thick of when you read my history, that short time frame between May and November. All of those things happened with the death of my sister-in-law. Actually, our dog died like 3 weeks later, which isn't listed in there. There are a few things. My stepdad also had like a brain stem surgery. So he was in a precarious state with that. That was closely followed by my mother-in-law's accident where she was hit by a motorbike while she was crossing the street. So she was then, and her daughter had just passed away. So, and then by Thanksgiving of that year, leading up to Thanksgiving, my stepmom was in the ICU with a failing heart and ultimately had a heart transplant. So with all of this happening, I was living with my family in Italy for my husband's job, and we couldn't be with anybody, very easily. There were, of course, trips. My husband's family's in England, my family's in America. So we were taking trips, but it was just adding to the stress of everything was that every time the phone rings, you're like, oh my God, I don't throw my phone into the closet or something. I don't want to listen. I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear whatever somebody wants to tell me now that's, shocking out of left field. So with all of that, I really felt that meditation was going to be a way to help me with my overwhelm and just trying to cope with this reality that I didn't understand. And so I had tried meditation in the past. I'd always been interested in it, and it had always kind of caught my attention in terms of if there was an article about meditation or if I was reading a book and, the person meditated, I was always kind of like, but what do they do? Because I had tried to meditate and I couldn't get anywhere with it. It was like my mind just was wandering like crazy. And I was just sitting there thinking, it was like, I can sit here and think and watch TV. Like, why, this isn't doing anything for me. And but through those series of tragedies and heartaches, I was like, okay, I need meditation. I felt that that was going to be a game changer for me, but I knew that I needed more than just a vague understanding of what it was. So I actually kind of did an inward prayer. I really distinctly remember dropping my kids off from school and walking home by myself, and just talking to God in my head. And I was kind of agnostic, I mean, I wanted to believe in God, but I don't think I ever didn't believe in God, but I really didn't feel very connected. Like I kind of just felt like there was so much tragedy all over the world. There's so many people in need that, like, why should God listen to me? Like,
Yeah.
she's fine. No, leave that one. She's fine,
Right.
And so it was sort of a Hail Mary, in the athletic sense of like, okay, I don't know where to go to figure out how to meditate. I was living in a, non-English speaking country. And although I could speak the language ish, I could get by, but I knew that, like, I wanted to dive deeply and not have something like language be a barrier. Like I really wanted to be able to dive into it. So I was like, God, I think that meditation is something I need. If you're there, help. I want it to be in English. And it was almost like a little joke in my head, like, okay, I'll just ask God.
Sure.
And then through that, a series of synchronicities happened where, people were sort of pointing me in different directions. In a way where I didn't have anybody to ask, hey, what's your meditation practice like? Like nobody was doing this in my world. And somebody recommended a film that was the life of Paramhansa Yogananda, who was the author of the autobiography of a yogi. And this documentary just really spoke to me. And he had, these methods that were practical and kind of a scientific approach in terms of like, you will get a specific result if you do these specific things. And the film doesn't really go into what his methods were, but I was very, very intrigued and read Autobiography of a Yogi and eventually found an online program that taught his methods. And there's a whole lot more detail in, synchronicities and different ways that things showed up for me. But it was through being able to find, and that was like a big wow moment, because all the paths I was going down required me to go to California, actually, which I know that's where you are.
Yeah.
But it was every avenue I explored to learn his methods. It was like, go to California for a week or for 3 weeks or whatever, and learn from monks who are still using his methods.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I've got my children. I have 2 children, and
Yeah.
they
How are
were
you going to
quite
make that
little.
work?
Right. And I'm living in Italy, so it's
Oh
like,
my God.
I don't have the luxury of
Wow.
just, like I very practically, my husband was traveling for work all the time. And there was like, that was not going to happen. And I knew that there could be a chance once we moved back to America, but that was going to be like 2 or 3 years from when I had started this journey. So when I finally, after like, roadblock, and found an online program that had a pretty tech savvy, program where you can learn remotely. There's no need to be in person. I was like, it felt like the clouds parted and the
Yeah.
sunlight was streaming right on me. And I was like, oh my God, here it is. So that was how I got on my meditation journey.
What were some of the few things that you learned in the beginning that started to align you with meditation, getting you
Well,
comfortable with it?
yeah, it really was. It really was having methods. That was the big game changer for me. So rather than just sitting there and trying to clear my mind, which seemed impossible, like I knew
Yeah.
that from experience, that I couldn't just sit there and not think
Right.
and will myself to not think. It was having like steps, you sit down and here's how you relax your body. And here's why it's important to relax your body. And then it's using the breath, and why do we use the breath, and what are some breath techniques that we can use, and learning about how the breath and the mind are so interrelated. So if we can use the breath, then we start to be able to control the mind, and we start to be able to quiet the mind. And then learning different things like visualizations and affirmations. But the first part of my meditation journey was very secular. It really wasn't spiritual, even though I was learning the methods of deeply spiritual meditation master. He died in 1952. So it's his legacy, it's people teaching his methods, and they were teaching, pray before you start. And they were, offering their lineage of people that you can pray to, ascended masters and so forth.
Yeah.
But I still really held that for a long time at arm's length, where I was like, well, I'm really just here for the calming and I don't really, I don't know about this prayer thing. And I got called out by a healer that I went to during that time, when I was really in this in between state where I was meditating, but I really wasn't opening myself up to spirit. And she had no reason to think that she knew that I was a meditator. She knew that I was following Yogananda's teachings and things like that. But she did this healing session on me, and she got to my heart, and she was like, why don't you pray before you meditate? It was such a no-brainer for her, because she also followed Yogananda's teachings, and she knew so she was like, wait, your heart's not open. Why aren't you praying before you meditate? And I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that, So it was really that took me more time to really get comfortable with the spiritual aspect. And then, eventually that skyrocketed. But
Carol, what's the difference between praying and meditation?
what a great question. They really can go together very seamlessly. Praying is really the asking, it's really it requires some thought. It requires some, you're getting into the language, you're using the language part of your brain. I've heard masters say, praying is talking to God, meditation is receiving and listening.
Oh, wow.
And that resonates a lot with me too, where it's listening, but not really with the ears, listening for just you can listen and feel, listen and just pick up on the subtleties that are happening inside, listening or feeling for tension, but also for inspiration and guidance. And those things can be subtle. So, meditation is, meditation is a lot of things, that are done with intentionality. And one of those I would say is the listening and the receiving.
Awesome. So then you learned from this, it was a healer that told you this?
Yes.
That's interesting that the healer was able to tap into that and know that you weren't praying before meditating.
It's so interesting because the whole thing was interesting because I was on a retreat, and it was a retreat for yoga. This organization follows Yogananda's, they're dedicated to Yogananda's lineage and his teachings. And it was actually in Italy, in Assisi, where St. Francis is from. But she was offering this class, and I just went as kind of a weekend retreat or whatever. And I took her class, and I was the only one who was already in this path of Kriya Yoga, and in this path of I already knew about the lineage. I already knew Yogananda. I was kind of the star pupil of this class, because I already had a foot in with, and a lot of people who were there didn't have any exposure to it. And so that's one of the things that kind of blows me away. She told me that she doesn't really offer these healing sessions for people, but she was guided to say to me, if I wanted one, that she does this kind of work. And so again, she didn't have any, I was sort of the star pupil. You would think she would assume that I prayed, because
Yeah.
it's a big part of what they teach. So looking back, it's like, wow, that blows me away too. Like she shouldn't have expected, she wouldn't have just assumed, she would have assumed I do pray,
Yeah.
from a logical perspective. So
Sounds like she's super highly intuitive.
exactly. Yeah.
She felt into your energy and knew that there was something missing that could possibly guide you to exactly where you needed to be and increase your awareness.
Yes. And it was specifically at the heart because her method like used the chakra system. So she kind of started on my, first chakra, the root chakra, and worked her way up, and she would give intuitive guidance. So she was doing healing work, but she would also talk about what she picked up from it.
Wow.
And it was when she got to the heart that she was like, your heart isn't closed. I mean, not closed totally, but she was like, this is what you do to help it open.
For expansion.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What type of
Yeah.
healer was she?
She was just a very humble, she was German and we were in Italy. She was living in Assisi, Italy. I don't even know that there's a name for the method that she was using. She just did some Kriya breaths and tuned in.
That's
She
amazing,
was
Kara. Wow.
super cool.
I need some chakra healing.
I know, right?
I gotta find
Yeah.
myself a chakra healer.
I'm sure she can work remotely. I can find her contact info if you want.
Yeah, if you can, please. That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm.
So I saw on your biography here, I'm sorry, on your page, that there are some questions that you're ready to ask. So that you're ready to answer. So I'm ready to ask these questions.
Okay, awesome.
And I'm excited about it because I've never asked these questions with anyone before. So I want to start with the power within us and how we deny it and give it away. What do you mean by the power within us, and how do we deny it and how do we give it away?
Yes. So this is one of the things that in the introduction, you were talking about different visions that I've had, different experiences that I've had where I've really experienced myself as energy. I've seen myself as energy. I've experienced myself like without form. And it's a testament to the fact that we are these powerful beings. We have these huge reservoirs of energy within us, but we're very inclined to kind of make ourselves small and to defer to others and to really kind of like you just said, hand our power away. And that we do this in a multitude of ways. So we can do this with well, if we talk about like spiritual lineages, if you're in a spiritual like guru kind of relationship, we can even do it in that type of relationship. You can do this with anybody that you sort of default to, where it's like, oh, this person knows the answer. And without searching within or without really trusting the insights that you're getting within yourself. So it can be very easy to be like, oh, this person has more experience, has been doing whatever for longer. I mean, a therapist is a good example of a potential, where it's like, oh, this person has had all this training. They have their doctorate, they have, whatever. And so they must know. And sure, you can get so much help from professionals, and we don't want to override any sort of inner wisdom that we have within us. But we do this we can even do it in terms of the media, where we're saying, whatever the hot topic that the news is on about today, this is what's important to me now, and politics and so many ways that we just it's really like using the masses, the mass consciousness, what everybody's talking about, where everybody's energy is focused, and just going, okay, this is where I'm giving my energy right now. This is where I'm giving my thoughts. So one of the ways that one of the many, many ways that I have reclaimed my own power is through not engaging so much with the news. For example, I used to be very tuned in to whatever was happening in the news cycles. And I could converse really easily about, whatever the, was happening in the
Yeah.
world. But when we think about the fact that the news that we're consuming is written by human beings who at some point there is an agenda. So this isn't like some conspiracy theory. I'm not saying any specific news networks because I see it on all sides, but everybody's answering to somebody, and everybody has something that they want you to buy into. And it's about like, what is really important to me? What is really, if we're not worried, but if we're working on our spiritual growth, for example, we are energy beings, and everything that we focus on, we're giving our energy to, at the expense of our own energy. So I had to have a realization within me of like, I'm really spending a lot of time focusing on all these things that are happening in the external that I'm not even going to remember in a week's time or in a day's time. And I'm doing it at the expense of the things that I could be doing that are actually helping me to tap into my own energy system and my own inner knowing. So I find that people make sure that I do know when something big has happened that is worthwhile. My husband's been traveling, and he just flew home today from Colorado, and he was like, well, hopefully my flight's okay. And I'm like, oh, because of the rain, the storms. And he's like, well, you heard about the American Airlines, thing yesterday.
Like, no.
Yeah, I was like, no, I don't know what happened, And so he'll catch me up, or people will be talking about it and I'll figure it out. But so, I mean, that's just one example where it's like we, particularly with mass consciousness and this kind of herd mentality where we just allow our attention to follow what is hot right now. It's like, that is not an empowering way to exist.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, I even get anxiety when I'm about to check my email and I open up the browser and there's like all this news. I'm like, no, I don't care about Kim Kardashian. No, it's like right away I want to get rid of it because it doesn't help raise my vibration. Not at all.
Exactly. Yes.
So the other question is, can we talk about the transformation capabilities of meditation? I know that's a loaded question, but at least the top 3 if we can.
Yes. Wow. I mean, there are so many different ways that we can take this, but one of the ways is, like we were talking about, the fact that we are energy beings. And, Einstein proved this with E = mc squared. It's like energy is matter. Matter is energy. And so we are energy beings, and it can start, a lot of people are like, oh, it's, the woo-woo thing. It's like, oh, it's energy, it's woo-woo. It's like, no, actually it's scientific. There are measurable things that you can do. There are measurable impacts. So like Heart Math Institute, if you're familiar, they've done a ton of work, and they have all this instrumentation that measures like the heart field, it measures heart coherence and how our heart energy affects other people, it affects the planet, it affects other sentient life, and it's measurable. They're using instrumentation.
Yeah, I did. I think I saw Dr. Joe Dispenza talking about this.
Probably, yes.
Remember now. Heart coherence. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then how that works within your own system. So your own heart, as it becomes coherent. And when I say coherent, or when one says coherent, it's really just about like a rhythmic, it's a smooth and rhythmic radiation, rather than like scattered and spiky. If you think about like watching waves on what are those things called like monitors, like a monitor. If you
Yeah.
watched a heart monitor or brain waves, you know, how they can be like
Yeah.
spiky and erratic and chaotic, or they can be like rhythmic and the peaks are matching and the troughs are matching and so forth. So
Yeah.
that's heart coherence, where it's like rhythmic and it's healthy and it's flowing. That also radiates up to our brain. So when we have heart coherence, you can have heart brain coherence, where your heart is actually radiating, the waves are radiating up to the brain and they're affecting the rhythms of the brain.
That's
So we
incredible.
often can think about, you know, the brain being this master commander of the body, but it's actually like your heart, what was I reading the other day? Your heart is like thousands of times. I want to say it's got, this could be wildly wrong, but I want to say I read 100,000 times more electric,
I believe it.
electric field than your
True.
brain.
Yeah.
It was, but it could have been like 1,000. But anyway, it was a lot. It was a lot. And then the magnetism of the heart was like 5,000 times more magnetic than the brain. So it's like, gosh, your heart is like so strong. So I sort of jumped ahead a little bit to some of the brain stuff. But in terms of transformation with meditation, we have this ability to really affect our physical being, our physiology, in terms of bringing more calmness and all of the cortisol levels and serotonin. It's all related, particularly with what's happening in the brain, with the certain meditations that will get you to focus more in the front or at the third eye, the pineal gland. They're strengthening, they're bringing all of your focus up into those executive centers of the brain. And those are also the centers where you have your creativity and your intuition and your altruism and your joy and your connection. So when we're active in this frontal part of our brain, we're having all those kind of higher human experiences. And then lower down in the brain is where we have the more primitive part. So we have like the fear and the anger, the rage, the disconnection, the kind of impulsive part of us. So that's lower down in the brain. Well, if we're meditating regularly and we're bringing our focus to the front of the brain, we're starting to train our brain that even when we're not meditating, this is the strong, active part of the brain. This is our launching point. So even outside of meditation, we're able to hold that kind of that calmness, that creativity, that happiness.
Yeah.
And we're not so triggered because the lower part isn't getting as much attention. So it kind of becomes weaker. It's not we're not so quick to come into judgment, to come into anger, sadness, because that's not the part of the brain that's used to getting the energy. Does that make sense?
It does. And also what I'm feeling into what you're saying is that this meditation and the way you're describing everything coming into harmony, kind of like we're talking about like everything, just the whole heart coherence and the brain coherence. What I'm feeling is like that's actually how your mind, body, and soul becomes connected.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things also with meditation. You know, it's such an amazing tool for so many reasons, because you can come at it really from like, I just need to feel calmer, you know, like I just need to not feel overwhelmed, the way that I approached meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you can also use it to help you connect with your spiritual aspect and get more into that alignment. So when you were saying that, it's kind of like, yeah, we've got all of these aspects of ourselves. We've got our emotional part of ourselves. We have our physical part. We have our mental part, the thinking part, and we have this eternal part of us that is the spirit. And meditation helps us to be able to kind of get those lined up and make it easier for us to connect to our spirit, because so many people are walking around and they're cut off.
Completely
They
disconnected.
they're so cut off. They might be cut off emotionally. That's definitely going on, but so many people are cut off spiritually, and they're denying that part of themselves. And I question the effect on their quality of life when they're unable to see themselves as an eternal being. You know, if you feel like your whole world is only what you can see, hear, smell, touch, taste, think, and emote, you know,
Yeah.
and that there's nothing else beyond that. You know, you have to wonder, like, how satisfied can you be? How purposeful can you feel if you're not nurturing that connection?
Oh man, I agree with you there 100%, Kara, for sure. And you know
Mhm.
what? I feel though, I do notice that there's, and mostly on social media, where I've noticed that the newer generations, like people even in their 20s, are becoming spiritually aligned and and teaching the world. And I'm actually like, wow, I wasn't like that in my 20s. Like I can see that there's some changes that are actually starting to evolve now, which is incredible.
Yes, I am with you. I mean, we're a similar age. You were sharing that you're about to have a birthday. I'm slightly older than you, but we're very similar. And I am seeing the same, I'm noticing the same thing. I mean, people, like you say, it's like they're like skipping.
They
They're
are.
like just skipping the whole queue. You know, it's like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Like, I had all kinds of steps I had to do before I got
Yeah.
to that point. But there are all kinds of theories about why that's happening in terms
Yeah.
of,
Uh-huh.
you know, the energy of the
Yeah.
planet, the energy
Right.
from the sun, and the different sun energy, the different planetary energy that they're born into, and also at a spiritual level, at a soul level, the mission of souls who have been born at certain times, you know,
Yeah.
and the gifts that were able to that didn't go to sleep, you know, the way that
Right.
they did for older generations.
It's interesting you just mentioned something about the sun. I've I was reading something about that recent a couple weeks ago, where the sun used to be more yellow and now it's a little more white. And that has
Yes.
something to do with people becoming more awake.
There's all kinds of
I
like,
know maybe it's just the theory, but it's something about it.
yeah.
I'm fascinated by it, so I feel like there might be some truth to this.
Oh my goodness, there's so much. There's so much with like
Yeah.
galactic activity and what that does to human awakening. There are all kinds of things that happen with the sun, solar flares, CMEs that are called
Yeah.
coronal mass ejections. These are like waves of energy. So you can actually see them. I think there's something called like spaceweather.org or something
I've
like
seen the
that.
graphs. They're really colorful. It's like
Yeah.
black with yellow and red, and it's
Right,
showing.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
the Schumann
yeah.
resonance.
The
Is that what
Schumann
you're talking
resonance.
about? Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's actually the planetary frequency,
Oh wow, yeah,
but it corresponds with the activity of the sun, because the sun is emitting energy directly to its planets.
yeah.
So
Wow, yes.
it's really interesting to see. There are people, like I'm having somebody on my podcast in a couple of weeks called Alexis of Ascension Diaries, and she analyzes space weather. So she
That's so cool.
tracks what's happening with the sun, and she's just taking data from different people, different organizations. So there is something I think called spaceweather.org, and they'll show like the sun. It's a video, a close up. I don't know how, like some satellite is monitoring the sun, and they show these videos of like ejections of energy from the sun. And so there are these coronal mass ejections, there are solar flares, and they have different ratings like X flare, M flare. And I'm not very, I don't know a lot about what the different categorizations are, but it's interesting to watch, like, oh, we're getting a lot of X flares, for example, and then there will be like volcanic eruptions on the planet. There will be earthquakes, like big earthquakes and storms. And so it's interesting to see this data side by side, because it takes about 3 days, like that when the sun shows one of these like eruptions or ejections, for that energy to hit the planet. But it's interesting to see how the planet responds. And then, of course, like we've been talking about, we are energy beings. So even though this is invisible energy, it affects us. You know, we are walking around in charged energy from this solar radiation. And I find it totally fascinating. I'm probably
It's
not the
incredibly
right person
fascinating.
to go deeply in it, but there's other stuff going on too, in terms of like high frequency photonic energy that's in the galaxy that the solar system has been moving through, and Earth is moving more and more into. And of course, then that becomes a part of our atmosphere, and it affects our consciousness. It
Sure
affects
does.
our awakening. So it's anticipated that we'll see more and more people awakening and tapping into higher levels of consciousness. And, you know, with that projection, meditation can be a huge benefit, because you are getting into calmness, you're kind of controlling your energy. And so that as you're being affected, whether you know it or not, by these solar, galactic, high frequency energies, that it's just easier to not get thrown off, because
Which is
you're just
actually,
more.
you're leading me into the next question. You're right on point.
All
Why is
right.
energy such an important part of meditation?
Yeah. Well, that's one reason.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know, there's, again, this is another one where it's like, so there's so many different ways that we can go into that. But one of the things is that we are energy, and like we were talking about. And so when we're in meditation, we're tapping into ourselves, we're sensing ourselves as energy, we're feeling into this non-physical part of ourselves. And then you can take that further and learn how to direct that energy, how to focus that energy. That can help with healing, for example. So when we start to, you know, the first step is just accepting that you are energy, you know, not closing off like that's woo woo. So step 0, accept it.
Yeah.
And, you know, step 1 is then, you know, taking time in stillness and just exploring and being, okay, I'm still in my body, I'm still in my mind. Let me feel into what I can perceive in terms of the non-physical aspects of me. And then we can have the ability to start to concentrate that energy and direct it. So kind of like how a laser is really focused, concentrated light. And it's so powerful that it can cut through flesh, and it can, you know, start a fire. And but then you can have diffused light, you know, there's still light, but it's just diffused and it's soft and it's, you know, but it's not very powerful. It's diffused. It's everywhere. It's scattered. Right.
Yeah.
And so it all has its place, but a laser is really freaking powerful.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you are really powerful when you can focus your energy. So you can do this in meditation, focusing your awareness and then utilizing that. So, you know, that's part of healing work. That's part of energetic healing, which is like connecting with the energy that you are, and then knowing how to use it, how to direct it, how to concentrate and focus so that you can send that energy where it needs to go. And it's also how we become badass human beings who are making change, because we have the ability to focus on what's important outside of meditation. So we know that we have a certain amount of hours in the day. We have a certain amount of energy. We can't focus on everything. And so if we are able to, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that's not important, this isn't important, this is what matters. And for the next 2 hours, this is what I'm doing. texts be damned, Facebook be damned, news be damned, whatever. I am focusing because then I can get myself into, I can utilize my energy. I can utilize also the energy around me that is helping to, that's available for me to tap into to affect change here in my physical reality.
I love that. I've never heard it described that way. Kind of like this, the way that your analogy is really incredible. The whole laser can have a powerful light, or you can have a diffuse light. I love that.
Thank you.
Become that powerful light to make the change that you need to see happen.
Absolutely.
Carol, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Could you describe your experience in seeing how time works?
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Yes.
my, I have to ask that. I had to.
Yes, yes, this is awesome. So this was actually one of my first, I call them like multidimensional experiences where I like start to go to bed, some people think that I'm talking about lucid dreaming, but it's basically like I am not sleeping, but I'm seeing these patterns. I'm seeing geometries. I'm seeing it. Sometimes it's like I'm in this domed room, but it's like got all these, a lot of times it looks kind of like a cathedral, like the inside of a cathedral, but with all these like geometries in it, like
Like a
these,
kaleidoscope type thing.
yeah, that's part of it sometimes too. A lot of dome kind of like, I'm in the middle of like a dome, but it's very kaleidoscopy, very like geometric. Anyway, so the first time that I really had one of these experiences where I was like, whoa, I mean, it was kind of like I was on mushrooms or something. And so the experience, there was many, like I was kind of in different places, and then I would like rise, like I would literally feel like I was lifting into a different kind of realm or something. And then I could like lower back down and raise back up. And it was like really, really wild. But at one point I found myself I was looking down on this, like this circular spherical, with all these like pathways almost, and they were different levels, so different heights, but it was very like spirally, I guess. And I just there wasn't any sort of guide with me or anything. But I just understood. I was like, oh, this is time. I just had that
You had
knowing.
the feeling, so you knew, yeah.
Right. And so it was like, and it was like, okay, well, how does this work? And it was like, time was whatever you were experiencing. It's just because on this wheel, it's where your focus is. So rather than it happening like, well, now it's 5 o'clock because it was 4:59. And before that it was 4:58. It's like, I'm just focusing on this point on this spiral, and that's why I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing. So like I knew in this state, I knew that I was experiencing something I'd never experienced in my life. And I want to say it was October 14th, at that whatever year. And it was sometime in October that year. And it was like, it's October 14th, or it was like, this is happening right now because I am focusing on the point when this happens, rather than like, oh, this was always going to happen on October 14th from a linear perspective, if you follow. Anyway, not too important, but it was just like this different, like, oh, it's just, there's stuff that we're going to experience, and it's in this spiral. And the way that it happens is because that's where our awareness is. That's how that part is active in that spiral. So there were all these different levels. as well. So it wasn't like this flat spiral. It was kind of like almost like how skyscraper, like a city skyline type of idea, where you've got bigger buildings and taller buildings and shorter buildings and so forth. And that I understood because the focus and awareness, it's almost like a record needle.
Okay.
Now, if anybody is in their 20s, they might not remember
Yeah.
what actually they're cool now,
Yeah,
right?
they
I
are
don't know.
cool now. Yeah.
Yeah, we had them when I was little, but it's like you put the needle down on a record, and there are different depths that you can put that needle in, and that determines the experience that you have. So and that is also related to frequency. So the experience that we're having right now,
Yes.
we're experiencing it. You can think of it as like a record needle coming down in each of our lives, and we're experiencing this. And there are different levels that we could experience it at. So we could be having this same experience and it could be terrible. And you and I could both feel awful and really not like each other. And we can't wait till it's done. And that's one way that we could be doing this.
Uh-huh.
And then we could have like a peak experience. So this is like the highlight of our day or our week. And we're so like pumped that we got to be with each other. And it's just been this really fulfilling, expansive time. And then there's like this multitude of things in between of ways that we could experience it. And it's just, and it matches up with frequency too. So that there's a frequency element to that. And that's occurring in every experience that we have in our life. And then I had the idea, like, what happens if I put the needle down? I'm using that analogy, but like, what happens if I jump over to this other part of the spiral? And so I did. I just put my awareness on this other part of the spiral. And then I was in this, like, I want to say it was like the 1800s.
Wow.
And it was like a gloomy, like heavy sky. And there was a big tree and there was a horse. And then there was like this tall, like kind of stone building type of thing. And there was a little girl. There was like maybe a 10-year-old girl there. And nothing that I recognized from my life. And I had the idea that it was like Scotland, something like that. And I was like, oh, that's what's going on over there. Okay, I get the idea. And then I like went and explored something else. I had a different experience, but I never really understood if that was like me,
Time
a
travel?
different, incarnation,
Oh,
a
wow.
different lifetime. Because it was in like my spiral or the spiral where my life is. So it wasn't, I still had, I kind of look back on that like, oh, I was kind of hasty in just moving on. Like, oh, okay, I get it.
Mhm. That's almost like, I feel like it was almost like time traveling too, right? Like you can actually time travel within your meditation,
Right.
within your visions.
Yes. Yeah. Because it was happening. It was like, oh, that is what's happening over there on that part. I mean, it's happening now.
Hmm. It's kind of like, from my understanding of some dreams, that's kind of what happens when you dream sometimes too. You're able to tap into that part, the different time frames.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Dreams are a whole other
Yeah, a whole other top. Oh
interesting
yeah, totally.
realm. Yeah.
Kara, if you can go back to the time before you started meditating, the time when you kept getting all this bad news after bad news, when you were in a darker space, knowing what you know now, if you could actually take that, meditate, and go time travel to that time, what would you tell yourself?
What a great question. Oh, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, it's going to be okay, um, and that it's going to change everything and it's going to be okay, but it really, it's, it's great when we can look back on experiences that have just been devastating for us and to be able to see like, okay, that was a catalyst to something extraordinary.
True.
And to be able to keep building on that and get the most out of it is all we can do. Because these these kind of things, we all have our traumas. Nobody is immune to having these traumatic times. And so to be able to utilize them for our own growth, I think that's really all that we can do.
Totally, absolutely. Kara Goodwin, everybody, on A Little Less Fear podcast. She's also a meditation and spiritual transformational coach. Transformation coach. I said transformational. I guess it's kind of part of the same thing. How can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you if they need some spiritual transformation and if they want to tune into your podcast?
Oh, thank you so much. So the podcast is The Meditation Conversation. You can find it everywhere and on my website, which is themeditationconversation.com. I have my own website for all the meditation stuff at karagoodwin.com. And I'm on socials, at Instagram and Kara_Goodwin_meditation, and LinkedIn and Facebook. I think both of those, I'm Kara Goodwin Meditation. So I'm easy to find.
So awesome. I'm really glad we had this incredible conversation. I feel like I'm ready to meditate when we get off here. We're done with this podcast.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for being on A Little Less for your podcast, for sharing your incredible wisdom, your light, and your energy. I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And just thanks again. I really appreciate this connection.
Thank you so much. This has been such a blessing.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Kara.